Okay, hi, my name is Tendai. I spend a lot of my time helping large companies try and figure out how to make the lean startup process work within their organizations. And the moment you walk into a large organization, you figure out straight away that lean startup training is not enough. Even though executives are always inviting you to do the business model canvas workshop or do the experiment workshop, you actually find out that after you train the teams, it's then harder for them to do that practice because of the way the company is run. And I like to think of it in these terms. Jeffrey Moore says that the reason why large companies sometimes lose to startups is because startups have all their enemies outside the organization, whereas startups within organizations have enemies within the organization and enemies outside the organization. And so they're fighting their war on two fronts. And the reason why this breaks is because the methodology for doing lean innovation is slightly different from the way that large companies work. So this whole week we've been talking about running experiments, testing assumptions, the fact that it's a non-linear process, the fact that you have to test for feasibility, desirability, and viability before you scale. This rhythm of build, measure, learn is slightly different from the way that large organizations operate. And so I like to call this like one of the biggest challenges that large companies have, which is what we call rhythm misalignment. So large companies can do a lot of things. You can even have idea competitions, and your team can get selected as having won the hackathon or the idea competition. But guess what you've won? Ding, 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 ding. You've won the chance to write a 30-page business case. Right? Because large companies will not invest in anything until they know what the ROI is and there's not enough revenue. So you have innovators trying to run experiments to try and figure out what the true business model is, and large companies want you to tell them what the business model is up front before they release funding to you. And so what we're thinking about is, how do you actually build a rhythm of making investment decisions that is aligned to the rhythm of innovators? And so I like to call this the build, measure, learn loop for investing money. We've been hearing about this all week. It's like the build, measure, learn for making investment decisions. So you invest a little bit, you track progress, you review what the team is making. Are they close to product market fit? You double down if they are, or you exit if they're not. This is how you align investment decision making to the rhythm of how innovators are supposed to work. And the previous speaker was already telling you about the stages that you go through, and you can make investment decisions based on those stages. The next challenge, which is what this talk is really about, is what we call the problem of success. So imagine that you're a startup team in a large company and you've actually made something pretty cool. You've got customers, and now you're looking for resources to scale what you've done. And then you take it to your company to get these resources, and nobody wants to give you the resources, right? And this problem usually occurs because most things that innovators are working on are not on anybody's strategic plan. They're not on anybody's roadmap for the future. Nobody's thinking about what to do with those things, right? What large companies are doing when they set up innovation labs is get me a bunch of stuff and get me a bunch of people and then get them to work on some cool stuff over there. Let's hope something cool comes out from it. But, we don't really know what's going to happen with it once it's actually successful because nobody has actually thought that far. And so a recent study by PricewaterhouseCoopers actually revealed that nearly 70% of all companies kind of struggle with connecting their innovation strategy with their overall business strategy. And then what's really interesting is that like 54% of companies that are spending quite a large chunk of their resources on innovation, these are companies that supposedly get it, right? They're spending a large amount of money on doing innovation projects. 54% of those have no connection between the investments they're making and any thought about what the strategy that they're pursuing is with those innovation projects. And so these random acts of innovation are much more likely to fail because if you come and go, I have a validated business model and I'm ready to scale, people don't know what to do with that because it's not aligned with anyone's innovation strategy. And so, right, here we go. So I would like to call this the build, measure, learn loop for strategy making, right? And so the first thing that we want to do is we want to make sure that before we invest a single dollar in innovation, we take a point of view about where the world is going right? We have to take a point of view about where the world is going. What are the trends that are impacting our business? And what are the things that are coming up in the future that we think we need to respond to? What products in our portfolio are declining that we need to fix, right? We need to take a point of view about that. And then after we take a point of view about these trends, we then need to take a specific point of view about how we're going to use innovation to respond. And I call this the innovation thesis. It's actually based on the venture capital notion of investment thesis. If you're a venture capitalist, the whole time you're getting pitched startup ideas by 1,000 people, you can't invest in everything, so you have to make a decision about the kind of things you invest in and the kind of things you don't invest in. And large companies don't really do this. They don't have an innovation thesis, right? But also the reason why we like to call it an innovation thesis versus a law is because an innovation thesis is a hypothesis about the future and how we're going to use innovation to respond to that future. And so the investment decisions that we make into these startup teams become experiments on our innovation strategy. So the startup teams are running experiments on their business models, but we as investors and leaders are using those startups as experiments on our innovation strategy. And so we make these investment decisions, we review how successful these things are, and then on a quarterly or biannual basis, we get together and review our portfolio and actually what's going on there, and then iterate the thesis or just keep going and scaling that thesis. And so I'd like to give you an example of one of the organizations that I'm working with. They're called Pearson. It's a FTSE 100 company, a global education company. And part of the process that we're building there is something that we call the Product Council. And the Product Council makes investment decisions on specific innovation projects as they move along their product life cycle. So have you validated customer need? Have you validated the solution, et cetera, and they make those investment decisions. But in addition to the Product Council, we're also setting up a system called the Portfolio Council. And the role of the Portfolio Council is to make decisions about strategy and to make allocations and investments to particular strategic initiatives based on an analysis of the portfolio, which is that the first thing we do is analyze the portfolio, map the portfolio, see what products we have, see what's happening, see what's struggling. We also have a process for mapping the landscape, right? Who are the competitors? How are things changing? What are the key trends that are impacting us, right? And then on the basis of that, we can start to develop a general vision about what kind of things we want to invest in. Where do we want to take the company? What kind of innovation projects should we be working on? And in addition to that, we want specific goals about business metrics that we want to accomplish. What is the portfolio makeup going to look like? What percent will be digital? What percent will be analog? What percent will be in what market? What percent will target what market segment? All of those things are things we want to be thinking about as we set up our vision and goals. Now, once you've done that, the next thing you need to then do is stop for a minute and think, okay, we've seen what the world looks like and where the world is going. We've taken a point of view about where we want to go. Now, let's look back at our portfolio and see where we want to go and where we are. What is the distance that we have to travel? What are the gaps and opportunities, right? And then from there, your investment themes start to emerge. We're going to invest in these things to plug these gaps. We're going to invest in these things to explore these opportunities. And then you can start to organize those in a hierarchy of decision making. And then, only then, do you then make the decision to allocate resources. Right? You don't start with the really impressive startup guy who walks into your office and goes, I have an idea, let's build an innovation lab. And in the lab, we're going to have foosball tables and bean bags and Post-it notes. And we're going to make some cool stuff that's going to save your company. And you're like, that sounds good. Some other company has an innovation lab. Here's the money for that, right? Because if you do your analysis in this way, and then you identify the gaps and opportunities you want to explore, it is actually possible that an innovation lab is not the right solution for what you're trying to do from a strategic perspective. And so if you actually make decisions based on your strategic opportunities, you can make a different set of decisions. And the fundamental philosophy that's underlying this budgeting and resource allocation is this. Not a single dollar moves from the company's bank account into some project except when it's a specific expression of our strategic intentions. There's no let's see what happens dollar, right? Every dollar moves as an expression of our strategic intentions, and that's what we're trying to do. And then the final process is the tracking and reporting. So everything that you're investing in, you then want to use innovation accounting metrics, right, to track whether or not the customer opportunity you thought was there, the customer jobs to be done are real. The solutions that you were thinking you were going to create to meet those jobs are real. Is the market opportunity real? And on a quarterly basis, you're then able to do these reviews based on these projects as an analysis of whether or not the investment themes you developed and the innovation thesis you developed is actually correct. Right? And then over time, you can start to land on the right things. And so this is just a picture of the portfolio council making decisions and the product council making decisions. I just thought I'd give you that to make it look more real. And then what I also want to show you, and this is featured in our book, The Corporate Startup, is a bank called Spar Nord. They're one of the large banks out of the Scandinavia region in Denmark. And this is their innovation thesis. It's quite broad, because that's what they're willing to show the world. But it's just, I've never even been in a company where they even have an innovation thesis this broad. Like, nobody's actually thought about it explicitly. If they've thought about it at all, they're talking about investing in blockchain in general terms. They're talking about investing in Bitcoin in general terms. They're just talking about general trends, but they're not really thinking specifically about how they want to respond to those trends. And so you can see there in the second row, they're identifying the trends that are impacting the bank. And then they're thinking about the must-win battles that they have to win, the investment themes that are connected to those trends, right? Beyond just the general vision of being the most personal bank in a digital world. And so this is key, because then you can make your investment decisions based on this. Now, what I want you to think about as I'm kind of wrapping up this talk is what I really want you to think about is the alignment that this drives. At the most granular level is innovation practice, right? This is a team that is working on a specific innovation project. They're running experiments, they're testing their ideas, and they're trying to figure out whether or not they have the right business model. But this team is really comfortable because they know that the thing they're working on matters to their company at a strategic level. They're not having to hustle or run a guerrilla movement and try and hide and protect their idea. They actually understand that their idea is important to the people that are investing in those ideas, because those people have already communicated to them that this is part of their innovation strategy. So that's the build, measure, learn loop of the team working on a specific project. The build, measure, learn loop of a board of decision makers that are releasing specific resources to those specific projects is exactly the same. We invest a little bit, we track your progress, we review, and then we double down. This is what Eric Ries refers to as metered funding. So the investment board is also using a build, measure, learn loop connected to the build, measure, learn loop that the team is using to work on their experiments. And then those investment decisions that are being made by the board that's making investment decisions are being reviewed at a portfolio level to see if they're delivering on our strategic intentions. And so we take our innovation thesis, we line up all the projects that are connected to that innovation thesis, and then we track how well they're doing in terms of delivering success on the basis of our product life cycle or our innovation framework or whatever it is that we're using for innovation accounting. We see that this one is failing. What are the lessons learned from this one? Do those lessons learned mean that we have to maybe adjust our thesis? What are we learning from the startups that we're launching out into the world? And in that way, you then connect innovation strategy to the investment decisions you're making to invest in specific projects, to those specific projects that are then working to actually test that innovation thesis. And then you have what we call an innovation ecosystem, an end-to-end process for managing innovation within a large organization. And so I have no more to share. This is as far as I have to go. I will be at the Meet the Authors lunchtime thing at the Village. Swing by, say hello, and thank you very much for listening. Cheers.